Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Last year, Allan Rhodes, a longtime friend of the college, made us a deal we couldn't refuse. He promised a $1,000 award to a student author of a paper about a distinguished Kentuckian whose contributions to our state have largely been forgotten. With me today is Mr. Rhodes and the winner of that award, Robert Keith Ford of Ballard County. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Rhodes, what prompted your generosity?
I've always had an interest in Kentucky history. After I bought my first history book, which was 79 cents at a Firestone store. And then Bill Townsend, Lexington, wrote a book called Lincoln and the Bluegrass. That really focused me on Kentucky history, and particularly overlooked Kentuckians.
Your topic, your subject, was Sergeant Morris E. Crain of Bandana.
Yes, sir.
You live in La Center.
Yes.
Tell us how you came to write about Sergeant Crain.
Well, his Sergeant Crain's sister is a member of the Bandana Methodist Church where we go to church at. And unbeknownst to me, until after my wife's father said that was Sergeant Crain's sister. And then whenever the chance to enter the contest for the History Award, that's whenever I picked the subject. And it was very interesting getting to talk to her, and then she provided me with some names of gentlemen who had served with Sergeant Crain during the Second World War, and got to talk to them, and it was really interesting.
Before the program, you and I were talking. You are a graduate of Ballard Memorial High School, and I do know that going into, I live in Mayfield, and if I'm heading toward Wycliffe, when you pass the county line, you see a sign that says Ballard County, home of Sergeant Morris E. Crain. You said when you were a student at Ballard Memorial High School, you didn't pay a whole lot of attention, even though there is a stone memorial to him in front of the school.
Correct. It was set in front of the school, and the parking lot was over on the left-hand side, and if you were going to the center, you cut in front and just go on past. You wasn't really paying that much attention. Then one day, I was helping put up the flag and stood there and read the actual citation that President Truman had wrote, and that's engraved in stone out there, and it just kind of blew me away. And then after that, just kind of forgot about it up until this.
Being an old reporter, I certainly admire not only your writing style, but your digging after facts. You actually tracked down two men who served with him in the Army. How in the world did you find them?
The addresses that I had were old and got returned to sender, non-deliverable. Finally,
So you wrote letters first?
Yes, and got on the internet and started doing a search for the names and going state by state, and then getting numbers and calling. Do you know, were you involved in this? Were you in the Second World War? And about 90% of them, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then finally I hit one person. It's like, yes, that's me. And
now, which one was he?
Mr. Dooley.
And he was Sergeant Crain's company commander?
Yes, he was a company commander. And he was in rather poor health then, but he said, I'll send you a letter telling what all happened, and try to be as much help as I can. And he did. He helped out an awful lot.
And he has since died?
Yes.
Now, the other fellow was the commander of his regiment,
Yes.
a colonel?
Yes, he was a colonel.
And how did you track him down?
Basically the same way. The phone number was wrong, and so I started going through the same town and then locate him that way, and got the phone number off the internet. I think it was Yahoo People Finder or something like that, and called him up, and his wife answered, said, yes, I believe you have the right person. I'll see if he wants to talk, and he did.
Wow.
But he had taken over command right before the battle, but Mr. Dooley was the main source.
Wow. You also were able to, well, obviously the relatives of Sergeant Crain, but you said it was kind of a mystery what became of his widow after he was killed?
Yes, she had moved to Detroit, Michigan with their daughter. She was 2 at the time. The the Medal of Honor was awarded posthumously. But since then, not much information on them.
That'll be for a later research project.
Yes.
Then tell us just basically, he was born in Ballard County, Bandana. The war begins, he enlists, and then take it from there.
Well, he went to Camp Blanding, Florida, did basic training there, and then back up to Camp Robinson, Arkansas for infantry training. And after infantry training, he got one 14-day pass to come home and visit with family. And while he was there, he married his girlfriend, Charlene McTaggart, and then everybody got together and kind of said a sad farewell. And I mean, no honeymoon, no nothing. It was off to fight the war. And from there, he went to North Africa and was in Operation Cowpuncher. That was the beginning, or the practice run for the invasion of Salerno. And then they fought up the boot. It was pretty intense fighting, and it's it's almost like a movie, the way everything that he was involved in. He was wounded twice. First time was rather seriously, and in that battle, they had the Germans surrounded, and the Germans were fighting to get out. They weren't fighting just to keep the Allies back. They were fighting for their own survival, and they finally broke through and got out. And then he was wounded again at the trying to rescue the lost battalion, and that was whenever the 442nd Regiment come in and pulled that. And then finally, at the Battle of Haguenau, he was platoon sergeant then, and he rescued 5 of his men that were trapped in a building, and in doing so, he was killed. And it's just amazing what all he went through.
If I may, I want to read the part, and this came from Dooley, I believe. You told me that this is the story of what this happened, and as Keith said, it was near Haguenau, France. And it goes, many of the guys were on the verge of cracking and wanted to fall back, but Sergeant Crain stood his ground. The E Company had a rough and long time with very few replacements before the Battle of Haguenau, and this was starting to take its toll on the men of E Company. Just when it seemed the men were about to lose their nerve, Sergeant Crain started to move among the men of his platoon. He offered words of encouragement like a father to his child. The platoon stood firm. As darkness fell, the Germans doubled their effort to eliminate the Americans in Haguenau. German armor, specifically Tiger tanks and infantry. Now, to stop there, the Tiger tank was a fearsome weapon. Big metal monster, 88 millimeter cannon. It certainly struck fear in the hearts of men who faced that. Moved into Haguenau with artillery raining down in support of them, Sergeant Crain ordered his platoon to fall back to the edge of Haguenau. Now take it from there. Then what does he do?
Let's see. Then he was moving his men around and everything, and another platoon had come up to assist them, and while they were falling back, 5 of his men had gotten trapped in a building, and the Germans were trying to kill them. I mean, they were trying to flush them out and get them out.
Was this a house?
Yes, it was a brick house, and they were in there, and he knew of the situation, knew what was happening, and he couldn't let them die in there. So he went into the company commander's office, told him what was going on, and Mr. Dooley, or Captain Dooley, told him, "You don't have to do it." And he said, "No, they're my men. I have to get them out." And so
Crain had escaped from this trap.
Yeah, the men had just basically got lost and were in the fog of war and everything. They were fighting and didn't really know what was going on other than trying to survive. But he told his commander, he said, I have to save them. And so he grabbed a Thompson machine gun and some grenades and went back there after them. And the tanks were blasting at him, machine gun, MG-42s. The Germans were trying to take him out on the way in. he made it in, and
Was he wounded going in, or do you know?
don't know for sure. But he got in, held the Germans off long enough to get those 5 men out, and then he went after the other Germans that was in the house. And about that time, the last blow from the Tiger tank hit the house, and it collapsed upon him, killing him. And it was pretty sad, but he died thinking of others, not staying back, saying, well, they can fend for themselves. He died for
What's
his
the
men.
expression? Greater love hath no man. So he is killed in action, and then he is recommended for the Medal of Honor by Captain Dooley,
Yes.
who then wrote up the report of what happened.
Yes, sir.
In talking to his sister, they obviously got the telegram that families always dread in wartime. Did she talk about receiving the news?
No, not really. It's still, it's kind of painful.
How old was he when he was killed?
He was 20 years old,
20 years old.
not even old enough to vote yet.
Right.
And but he went in at the age of 17, and his parents were dead set against it. They no, there's plenty of other boys that can go fight. You don't need to. But he's like, no, that's something I've got to do. And his sister said that he was dead set on it.
Did you have to sign for?
Yes, they had to sign for him.
Because unless you're 18, you had to be signed for.
Yep.
So he talked him into.
Yes, sure
to
did.
enlist. What year did he? Do you know when he enlisted?
1942.
Right after, was after, well, obviously.
I believe it was April 42.
So in the spring following Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, it was 6 months after his 17th birthday and 4 months after Pearl Harbor.
Now the body itself was obviously recovered. He was buried there first.
Yes.
In a military cemetery.
Yes, sir.
Do you know which one it was?
Not right off. Not for sure.
Now the awarding of the medal itself. Who received it on his behalf?
His wife did. They had the ceremony in Detroit at his wife's house, and his little girl was 2 at the time, and there was pictures in the paper of her having that draped around her, and she didn't have a clue what it was. It was just something pretty, but he had never met his daughter. She was born, let's see, in I believe November 5th of 43, and it took if I'm correct, it was 4 months for him to get the letter from his wife that she'd been born.
So the letter came through long after he was
Yes.
gone.
Well, no, the letter of her being born came whenever he was in Italy.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay, so
And
he never.
No, he never got to see her.
Yeah, of course.
But after he received that letter that she had been born, they said that the war changed for him. His main objective was to get it over with and get back home to her. It was just, I've got to get home.
Do you know if he wrote his wife after he got that letter?
There were some letters. His main purpose was to get home and spend time with his little girl. That's what he wanted. What he was going to do with her and what all they were going to do and everything. But unfortunately, he never got to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was brought home for burial in 1948. Did you
Yes,
say?
sir.
And the service was at the church.
Yes, Bandana Methodist Church.
Can you describe what the service was like?
Not right off. I didn't get to research that deep into it.
Tell us more to do later.
Oh yes, but it was had a Medal of Honor service, military honors and everything, and then they buried him out at Mount Pleasant Cemetery, out between La Center and Bandana.
And he has a Medal of Honor tombstone.
Yes, sir, sure does.
So if anybody wanted to see it, they could
Yes.
see it. Well, going back to the award ceremony in Detroit, do you know who presented it? I mean, normally pretty high-ranking people, or in some cases, the president himself actually does it.
I haven't been able to get all the information on that. Captain Dooley said that he was up there whenever it was presented, but that's about all the information that I've been able to get so far.
So Dooley was home by the time it was.
Yes.
Do you know when it was presented? The date?
The date, no, let me check. I can't remember exactly. March 7th, 1946.
So the war was over.
Yes, war was over.
Was Dooley still in service, or do you
No,
know?
sir. He had already been
As a
mustered
civilian,
out.
he was a civilian. Okay. It's an amazing story, and I definitely think this could be turned into a. Trying to talk him into doing a master's thesis at Murray on this, and who knows from there, because in reading the story, it reminded me almost of the story of Sergeant Alvin York in World War I, from a rural area of Pall Mall, Tennessee. Goes to France, becomes the most famous American soldier, I guess, of World War I, and this fellow is very similar to that. Now, how many relatives does he have left in Ballard County? The sister?
Sister, I believe there's one or two others. I'm not for sure. I didn't ask about that. But there were 11 children. He was one of 11 children, but I know his sister, and I believe a brother, for sure, almost.
Are left.
Are still left.
Yeah.
The rest, I didn't get into that part yet.
Right, and I believe you mentioned that. After he was killed, his widow moved to Detroit.
Yes.
And you were not able to contact her.
No,
nothing
sir.
About the daughter.
No information whatsoever.
That's another project for later on.
Yep.
Again, this is an amazing. And one of the things I know in talking to Keith is that he discovered that research, oftentimes in research, they're blind alleys. You don't always. And did you ever get discouraged and you kept calling and calling
Yes.
and calling and thinking,
Yep.
what's the point of this?
There was a couple times it's like, forget it. It's not worth it. We were in the middle of remodeling a house, and there's so much other stuff, and then trying to track all these people down, and then finally just one day you hit the right person. It's like, okay, I think I can go on from now.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's like finding a diamond. It really is. Going on in your again, the letter comes from President Truman. Did you happen to see the letter?
Yes, saw the letter.
And but in the medal itself, you said the widow had.
I believe the widow has that.
And so that's not known what became of it. Do you know when the monument was built in front of the high school?
I believe it was 1961. Now, please let me check.
Certainly.
Got all the dates. Yes, May 61.
Right.
Whenever it was put out in front of Ballard Memorial.
Yeah. And also, I thought this was interesting. A cargo ship, the Mills Victory, was rechristened in honor of him.
Yes.
Was that one of the Liberty ships?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm not 100%.
And a non-commissioned officer building, NCO building,
Yes.
a non-commissioned officer building at Fort Benning, Georgia, is named Crain Hall in his honor.
Yes, sir. Sure is.
And you wonder how many fellows go through there, wonder who this Crain was.
Yeah.
I'm always curious. I know you are too, Mr. E. Who was this person? It's so buildings out here on campus. Who was Rosenthal? Who was Waller? I mean, and I think it's terrific to know that. So to follow up with this, now that you've won the award, now that you have the money, what are you going to do with this now?
I'd like to research a lot more on it. Miss Stevens, his sister, has a lot more information that I didn't get time to go through, and just like you said, do a master's thesis on it. That's what I really want to do.
You got a chance to read it over. What is your take on it?
I think it's really a fine piece of work, and after he does the master thesis, it's going to even get better, because he can fill in a lot of little gaps and things you wonder about and the blind spots that you have in it. But I think you've done an outstanding job.
Oh, I do too. It's a terrific piece for sure. Again, one of 11 children. That'd be fascinating to. The thing that really interests me about it, again, is the angle of here's a fellow. Now, you say he grew up in Bandana,
Yes.
which is not a major metropolitan area, not even for Ballard County. What would be fascinating to me is to know more of his impressions being so far from home and being caught up in this huge global conflict. Did his sister speak to that at all?
I asked her about that, and she said that he never really spoke that much about that she can remember about how everything was different and everything. His main objective was just to get it over with.
Mm-hmm. What about basic training? I mean, you know, the universal soldier gripe, sergeants who yell at us and people, you march all the time and you peel potatoes and all. Did he talk about that? Did she have much about that?
Not really. Not really. He was just, everything's okay. It's the Army. We have to march and just just constant training and stuff. And they're yelling at us and telling us that we've got to whip them and we're going to be victorious. But you've got to do your part.
Do you know when he was platoon sergeant?
Yes.
Do you know when how he was promoted up through the ranks?
He was promoted up after the battle, after trying to rescue the lost battalion. That was in 1944. Let me see here. Please forgive me. Let's see.
Now that's a famous story in and of itself. That was the Nisei, the Japanese American Battalion. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Senator Dan Inouye of Hawaii was in that battalion, who lost an arm in Italy. He won the Distinguished Service Cross. That was later upgraded to the Medal of Honor itself. That's a famous episode. Now, his outfit, it was what division was he in?
Sergeant Crain?
Yes.
He was in the 36th ID, 36th Infantry Division, T-Patchers.
Now, they were from Texas or something originally?
Yeah, it was originally a Texas National Guard unit.
And they're called the T-Patchers because
T-Patch. The patch is a flint arrowhead with a T right in the center of it, and that's how they got the T-Patchers.
Well, how did a Kentuckian wind up in that?
It's amazing. There was looking through the history of the 36th, there were several from all over the United States there.
Yeah.
It was in the 36th.
Well, I'm sure but the war was expanded, and they took guys from everywhere in there. Yeah. So his first combat would have been in North Africa.
Actually, he was in North Africa after they had pushed him out.
Oh, for the training.
Yes. He was in North Africa for the training for the invasion of Salerno.
Now that would be interesting of itself, as to coming from this well-watered, beautiful green fields, green trees of Ballard County to the desert, so to the Sahara. That would be an interesting aspect. Did his sister know? Did he say anything much about that?
No, sir.
Was he a pretty good letter writer? I mean, yeah.
So I think it got more after his daughter was born.
Sure. And then the landing in Sicily, which was an extremely bloody affair. Does he talk much about the campaign there?
Not a whole lot. He rather reserved on that. The invasion, all the fighting and stuff, just mainly it's tough. It's hard, but we beat them, and we got to keep on going. But he rather quiet.
Yeah. This French town where this took place is Haguenau. Where exactly is that? Do you know where in France it is?
I can't tell you right off the top of my head. I have forgot it.
Well,
had a lot going on.
I remember it's between Normandy and it's before you get to Paris.
I think you're right. It's after they broke out. Yeah. Was he in the Normandy landing?
No, sir. No, he went up through the Italian.
Up the other way.
Yeah, up the other way, and then up. Then they did a second invasion of southern France.
Right, they did.
Well.
Yeah.
What do they call it? The soft underbelly.
That's
underbelly.
Right. Soft underbelly of Europe. Yes. Again, a fascinating story, and I really hope that somebody watching this or reading about this or something will fill you in more on it. It's an incredible story. Any members? We also mentions his decorations here: Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters, which means he was wounded 3 times.
Yes.
Presidential Unit Citation, which is a do you know what he got the unit citation for?
No, sir. No, I haven't.
That, of course, is to his whole group involved in it, his unit, and that's a pretty high decoration as well. Another quote, and this came from his sister, mother and father would have no part of it. They did not want him to join the Army and go off to war. He was just too young, was their argument, as you said. Finally, after several patriotic arguments, Crain was able to convince them to sign his enlistment papers. This is a very effective use of quotes, being an old reporter. I do appreciate that. And then you go through the rest of that. Charlene McTaggart, she was from Oscar,
Yes.
another Ballard County community. Any McTaggarts left down there?
Yes, there's 2, I believe. And I've never have been able to contact them yet.
Very good. Now, back to the generous benefactor, sir. What made you decide to come up with this idea of $1,000 prize, which we do appreciate? I know that I suspect Mr. Ford will find some use for that. What made you decide to do that?
Well, I like Kentucky history, and I've been interested in it. Probably turned on by Bill Townsend up at Lexington.
Oh, well, that's an excellent book. I love the book myself, have it in my office.
And I think that really turned me on to Kentucky history. And since I do enjoy it, in fact, I go visit his daughter Mary Genevieve, who my wife and I knew very well, and her husband. And I still visit the house, and she's gone, but Joe Murphy, the husband, is still there. And incidentally, it looks just like it did in 1860.
Wow.
The paintings are still the same. The floors are still the same. It's a beautiful old place about 8 miles south of Lexington called Helm Place.
Huh.
Well, Benhard and Helm
Right.
lived there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I enjoy Kentucky history, and thought that this would be a good way to maybe get somebody else to think well of Kentucky history.
Well, the thing that I really appreciate about the award was again that the way you focused on an unknown person, because everyone knows or ought to know about Lincoln or Henry Clay, but the fact that this person was a major contributor to Kentucky but was somehow overlooked.
Well, that was Townsend's thing. I mean, remember, he rediscovered Cassius Clay.
Oh, absolutely.
Who'd been completely forgotten since 1900.
Right, right.
And in 1950, he brings him out.
Right.
And he did the same thing pretty much with Richard M. Johnson,
Exactly.
who is a big man in
gosh,
history,
Absolutely.
but nobody knows anything about
Right,
him.
right. To me, Richard M. Johnson, who ran for vice president, greatest campaign slogan ever: Rumpsy Dumpsy, Rumpsy Dumpsy, Colonel Johnson killed Tecumseh.
That's it.
I mean, that's just, you got to vote for a guy with something like that. We're out of time. Thank you all very much for being with me today. I'm Barry Craig. My guests were Allan Rhodes and Robert Keith Ford. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.